Hi, I'm Christian Bond, founder of Howly.io. Today, I'm going to talk all things HubSpot workflows. And if you already have a Howly Pro or agency account, feel free to follow along. And if you're new to Howly, no worries at all. Simply sign up for Howly and see if it's right for you. But for now, let's get into it. Now, HubSpot is one of the best tools I've ever used for creating workflows and automations. But what happens if that number of automations exceed 50 or 200 or 500? How do you, as a HubSpot admin, as a consultant, as somebody reviewing this account for the very first time, know how everything is connected? Oftentimes, we see years of accumulated workflow debt where you have workflows that are enrolling into others. You have workflows that set a certain property that trigger another workflow. You have workflows where a form is submitted and the lead joins a list, and then that is triggering a third workflow. And all of a sudden, you have one lead receiving 3 different nurture programs. That is the problem that Howly is solving for. So rather than having to click into each individual workflow one by one in HubSpot and figuring out how things are connected, mapping that process out, Howly does all of it for you automatically. This is the complete workflow visibility layer that sits directly on top of HubSpot to help you move more confidently when making changes and auditing your portal. So when you're signing into Howly for the first time, you're prompted to connect to HubSpot. And you do this by clicking the Connect to HubSpot button, which takes you to the authentication screen. From here, you want to select the account that you want to look at, that you want to review and audit. In this example, I'm going to select my developer test account, choose that, and from here, rather than seeing all of the workflows in a list view, we get every single workflow on this canvas. Each workflow is represented by a node on this canvas, and it's broken into the various object types. So for example, we have 42 contact workflows. We have 19 deal workflows. We have 8 company workflows, 5 ticket workflows, and 2 lead workflows. And all of these workflows on this canvas are mapped by newest, by what has connections, and I'll get into that in a second. One of the things you can do from this canvas is if you are looking for a specific workflow in your portal, you can search for it directly in the search bar here. So if I search for nurture, for example, we can see that it yields 7 results of nurture workflows that are found in my HubSpot portal. I can also filter directly by object type. I can filter by status, so active, inactive. If I only want to look at contact workflows, I can certainly do that, which helps me get a much clearer understanding of these are my active contact workflows that I should have a look at. Howly also makes it really easy to switch between portals if you are a consultant or an agency. This is how you see one portal right now. And if I remove those filters, what I can do is I can hover over the HubSpot connected and I can click on switch portal, which takes me back to the authentication screen. And if I select another account that I am a part of, what I can do is I can really quickly switch between the two and get that full visibility view that I just had. But if we switch back to our developer test portal for now, and the last thing I want to reference here is our Getting Started module down here, where you can see everything that Howly can do. So seeing your portal health score, we are going to explore a workflow. We're going to be using the impact analyzer, running an analysis of our portal, and then finally seeing the entire audit report. All right, so as the first step, what I want to do is I want to actually explore a workflow. And when we are on our canvas map and we zoom into a workflow that we want to have a look at, we can see that there are some dots on each of the workflows here. Green is symbolizing that the workflow is active. The purple dot is symbolizing that this workflow actually has connections to other workflows. So what happens if I click into this one, for example? Okay, right off the bat, it actually opens up the sidebar here, of which we can see the complete description of the workflow. We can see that this workflow sends 3 email nurture sequences with delays between each send to contacts added to the list called active customers. There is also a enrollment. Here we can see that this triggers when in list called active customers. Then we can see the complete list of actions associated with this workflow. We can see the connections here. We have found one connection. And then we can see some additional details, like when this workflow was created and when it was last updated. There's also a handy toolbar here that says what happens if I turn this off. If I click this, we can see that contacts added to the active customers list by workflow called Lifecycle Stage Customer Welcome will no longer enter this workflow. And if I move out of the way here, we can see that the line was immediately drawn. So we can see that there is a downstream impact from here, meaning that this workflow that we clicked on is started by this workflow here called Lifecycle Stage Customer Welcome. And this blue arrow here is symbolizing that. And there is even a helpful tip to say via the active customers list. What I can do when I am auditing my portal, when I'm going through it, is if this is something I want my team to see, if this is something that I'm leaving for myself, I can add a purpose note, like who the audience is, create some sort of SOP around this. So I'm going to say, please review this workflow. And then we want to associate a risk level to this. This is a low risk because it is only triggered when somebody is in that list called active customers. So I'm going to leave that as a low risk for now, save that note. And then when I click on my canvas again, we can see that there is a green dot, a green risk dot. And if I hover over the workflow directly, we can see that the note says, please review this workflow. If I want to go to the downstream connection from this workflow, I can either click directly in the sidebar, which takes me to it, or because I can see the connection directly, I can actually click on this workflow. And all of a sudden, we see that when I clicked on this workflow, again, we see the description, we see the actions and enrollment, but all of a sudden, we have 5 connections associated with this workflow. So there are 5 workflows that are starting this workflow, and some of them are, these are just the workflow names, but we can see that right off the bat, if I'm auditing this, we have 5 workflows that are starting this one with the lifecycle stage being customer. So what I can do is I can click into each one, but this is something that I want to review. Please review 4 workflows are writing to this. This is a high priority for me because why are there 4 workflows writing to this one property? So I'm going to save that, and what I'm doing now is I'm creating not only documentation, but because I can see how each workflow is connected, it allows me to get a much better sense of, well, what do I have in my portal and what needs to be cleaned up? If I zoom out briefly, I'm just curious to see what these workflows are connected. Okay, so we can see that there are 2 deal workflows that are writing into 2 active deal workflows that are writing into the customer stage or lifecycle stage welcome email. And they are the closed one customer update and closed one customer handoff. And then we have 2 inactive workflows that are also triggering this workflow, but because the inactive workflows are symbolized by the red line here, this is again just to symbolize what's there and what's active. And what I want to do is I want to actually separate this and have a much better look at it. And I do that by taking the workflow in question. We're talking about the lifecycle stage customer welcome, and I'm moving it up here. And this is what is the beginning of my process map as I'm creating this entire process and mapping it out directly in Howly. I like these lines for when I am looking at all of my workflows at the same time, but for separating a certain cluster of workflows, I really like the direct connections toggle. What I can do now is I can take these workflows and I can drag them up here. So we can see we have 2 workflows that are triggering this workflow. We have 2 inactive workflows here, and I'm going to put those over here for now. And now I've created a cluster. And what this shows me is it shows me that there are 2 workflows. Okay, interesting. When I clicked onto the closed one customer update, we can see that it not only starts this workflow that we were looking at called Lifecycle Stage Customer Welcome, but it actually starts two other workflows too. So one thing we can do is we can take these additional workflows and move them up here, and then we can start to create our documentation. Now, from this workflow here, the close one, customer update, we can see that it starts three other workflows, and they're all started when the lifecycle stage is customer. And if I was a consultant on this portal, this is something that I would immediately flag. And I would say, is this necessary? Is this something we could consolidate? We can even see that there are some that are notification based. We have some welcome flows, and then we have a removing from list. And one thing that I'm thinking immediately is the close one customer update. That workflow itself should trigger all of these three workflows. So this is where you can go ahead and consolidate. But rather than looking at everything granularly, one thing we can do is we can show all connections at the same time. And this is something that HubSpot doesn't do natively. And I think it's worth explicitly calling out because this is a genuine UX difference. So when I toggle all connections on, we can see the immediate cluster of some of our workflows. We have inactive workflows that are writing to three different workflows here. So these are things, again, I want to create my documentation. So I want to say, let me turn that on again. I want to say, please archive this workflow. This is a high priority. This is part of my cleanup. Then I want to click on the closed one, this workflow here. Again, this is an inactive workflow that can be archived. And I'm going to set that as a high risk level 2 and save that too. And if I zoom out on my canvas and I can switch back to my routed connections here, this is another way in which you can see how everything is connected at the same time. And one thing I might want to do is actually reset my canvas completely just to see how things are connected. And if I don't want to see my inactive connections, my red lines, and I just want to focus on what's active, this handy button down here will actually hide all inactive workflows and their connections. So what this gives me now is it gives me a super clear view of how everything is connected in my HubSpot portal at the same time, because it can give me that routed view. Next, I'd like to talk a little bit about the Impact Analyzer. And this is the tool that you want to use before you change anything in your HubSpot portal. What the Impact Analyzer does, and you find that in the floating bar here, is that it shows you a complete list of all of the most used properties across your workflows. Howly surfaces the most used ones, but if you have additional properties that you want to have a look at, you can certainly search for them too. Because we just talked about lifecycle stage and we saw so many workflows that are triggered or triggering by lifecycle stage being changed, one of the things we might want to take a look at first is clicking into lifecycle stage. And we can see the number 26 here. So this is the fact that there are 26 workflows affected by the lifecycle stage. There are 9 that trigger enrollment. So we can see here across our workflows that we have some workflows that enroll when lifecycle stage is customer or evangelist or marketing qualified lead or lead, right? And so if you were to set up a new workflow today that were to say, I want to have it's a sales-led motion, and when somebody enrolls and they've booked a meeting, we want to set them as SQL. One of the things that I would do is I would go into the Impact Analyzer in Howly and I would look at, are there any workflows here that are triggered when lifecycle stage is SQL? We can see that there are none here, but we can see that there might be some workflows that also modify the property. And so this is where you have workflows that set the lifecycle stage to any property. For example, these workflows here, it sets the lifecycle stage to marketing qualified lead. There are some that set it to opportunity, some that set it to other. And if I want to, I can go and get granular and click into this specific workflow. It takes me to it. We can see that, okay, when deal stage is contract sent, it sets the lifecycle stage to opportunity, sets the lead status to, okay, so this is a workflow that actually sets 2 different properties. So I would definitely look into this. This workflow is setting 2 different properties. Please review. This is a medium risk for me right now, so I'm going to save that. And as we saw with the other nodes that we left, if I hover over that, this is where my team or myself can really quickly look at what am I doing today and what has been reviewed. Clicking back into this workflow, what I can do is, rather than going into HubSpot, searching for this, I can actually open this workflow directly in HubSpot. Because Howly is synced directly to HubSpot and vice versa, makes it really easy to open this directly in HubSpot. And now we're here. And this is where we can go ahead and make our changes if we want to do that, or we can leave it for review. And once that change has been made, and I go back into Howly, everything that new can be found under the recent changes up here, where we can see the last changes from 30 days, 60 days, all the way down to the last changes for the last 90 days. And this is, I think, why Howly is so important for HubSpot admins, for consultants, for agencies, because when you're using the impact analyzer, you can see exactly what's being triggered if you're setting up something new. And what HubSpot will do, especially with the Breeze AI assistant, really anyone can go ahead and create a workflow, set a certain property, and turn that workflow on without knowing the downstream impact of doing that. And so by using the impact analyzer, the biggest use case here is this is your planning feature. This is where you audit. This is how you make sure that you can make these changes confidently without messing anything up on the back end of HubSpot. And next, I want to talk about the health checker. This is where we go from visibility to auditing. And the health checker can be found in the top right. This is the health score up here, where you can see everything related to all of your workflows. So rather than digging into each workflow one by one to look at broken enrollments or duplicate actions or empty workflows, the health assistant in Howly will show you the entire portal and every single workflow that you're working with. Right off the bat, we can see that there are 76 workflows analyzed here, and we get a total portal score of 81%. This is pretty good, but I do think that it can be better. And so one thing Howly flags is it looks at what are some really critical things with your workflows, what are some warnings, and what are some more info items here, like standalone workflows or things that are inactive or possible duplicates. And so if I were to click into the broken enrollments, that is a critical issue here. We can see that these are workflows pointing to deleted or inactive workflows. So I want to click on the set as MQL. If I click on the set as MQL, okay, we can see that this workflow right here, it starts 3 workflows. And the 3 workflows that it starts is the last activity date, 45 days plus MQL. And then it also starts 2 workflows down here, one called MQL follow-up and lead status update, and MQL welcome and sales follow-up. And if I go back to this one, I can make a note here to say this workflow is writing to 2 inactive workflows, archive the inactive ones, and review the workflow structure. This to me is a high priority because we don't want this to be accidentally writing to workflows that could be turned on at a later date, triggering something that shouldn't be. And so this is your opportunity to create that note for you or your team. And again, once we hover over that, we have the workflow note right here with the risk level being high. So that is when you're using the workflow health check. You can go through things like duplicate actions. So we can see that all of these workflows are writing to or setting this property called ICP profile tier, ideal customer profile tier, to tier 1, tier 3, etc. We also have 3 empty workflows here. These are just warnings, so nothing crazy there. And we can see that symbolized by the gray button here that this workflow has no actions, it's inactive. And so what we can do is we can click onto that. We can say, okay, there's already a note here called this workflow isn't connected to anything. Let's review. And again, I hover over that, I can see that note. And that's the health check. So this is where you want to come in when you are brand new at the portal or you're making changes or you're auditing. This is the tool that you want to use as changes are happening to see if your score is increasing or decreasing. In the health checker is also where you find the AI workflow analysis tool. And if I click in the bottom here where it says AI workflow analysis, it opens up a new model with Howly AI. This is a model that allows you to find and review all of your workflows to find gaps and opportunities and recommendations. And all of this is downloadable directly from the modal here, or also included in your audit report. So this takes about 15 seconds. So once it is finished reviewing and looking at all of our workflows, we can see exactly what it says. So this portal shows a mature automation setup with 76 workflows with 64% active, focused heavily on lead routing, deal stage management, and customer lifecycle automation. There's also significant duplication, so multiple active versions of a workflow called lead routing. There's some that are marked inactive or old. These are my own naming conventions in the portal here. We can see that deal and contact stage transition drive most of the automation, but there's strong coverage for closed-won handoffs and MQL follow-ups. If we look at the issues here, we can see that there are multiple active lead routing workflows. That's true, we reviewed that. There are some misleading workflow naming and status. This is especially helpful if you are a consultant, you're an agency tasked with cleaning up workflows, cleaning up the portal. Some naming conventions would be good here. We also see duplicate MQL and closed-won processes. We looked at that, right? They trigger on the same property, and several closed-won workflows, which we just reviewed here, all trigger on deal closed. This creates duplicate tasks, emails, and notifications. We also see some broken, placeholder test workflows, and then there are some workflows with no enrollment trigger, and that's also true. This is a demo portal, so this is just to show you, and of course each HubSpot portal will be completely different depending on the complexity, depending on the depth of the automations, pending the age of when everything was set up. So this is what gives you issues, gaps, and opportunities. At the end here, we also see recommendations. So a recommendation is to audit and deactivate all workflows with names like inactive, old, test, don't use. Also consolidate duplicate workflows handling the same trigger events, like lead routing or MQL setting or closed-won. We also want to review workflows with no visible triggers. And then lastly, evaluate whether early stage lead nurture should be reactivated or rebuilt. And what I can do from here is I can download this directly to my desktop. And this is a markdown file, so I can put this into Claude. As I'm working with it, I can put it into my LLM of preference. But what's really cool is that these insights are also included as part of your audit report, which we'll cover in a little bit. But first, I wanted to show you that if you are a true HubSpot power user, fully connected to HubSpot's MCP, one thing that Howly can also do is talk directly with all of your workflows in Claude. So if I close out of the AI Insights layer here and go to my Claude for desktop, I can actually prompt questions directly from Howly, and I can say, tell me about my HubSpot workflows. And from here, one thing Claude is going to do is it's going to prompt and query Howly's MCP, and then give me a complete list of all of my workflows and next steps. And so as we can see right now, Claude is telling me that I have 76 workflows, 49 inactive, 27 inactive. We have a portal health score of 81, and there's 112 issues to flag across the board. And these are all things that we saw directly in the health checker. But what's really cool is that these are things you can ask Claude directly about as you're working across your portal or portals. Okay, so want me to pull an actual list of the 6 critical broken enrollment issues first? No, thanks. Give me a list of the empty ones first and tell me what to clean up. So as I'm talking with Claude right now, it's taken this information directly from HubSpot, directly from Howly, all this information about my workflows, and it is telling me exactly what I need to do. So I can even from here open this workflow directly from Claude, takes me to that workflow in HubSpot, which is really, really cool. And so the cleanup call here is that all three are safe to delete. They're inactive and empty, so there's no logic or no risk of anything breaking. And so if you are a power user and you're working across your portal or across multiple portals, I definitely recommend setting up the Howly MCP. It's fully included as part of your core seat. So definitely set that up. And now you have a sparring partner. You have somebody you can lean on directly in Claude as you're going through your workflows. What's really cool too is that we saw how easy it is to switch portals. Once you switch your portal in Howly, that portal ID follows into Claude. So if I were to switch into a customer's account or one of my clients, one thing that Claude does is it picks up that immediately, and then we can have a new conversation about workflows. Now, just before we get to the report, one of the last things that I want to show is how you can prepare a planned workflow for an upcoming campaign. And you do this by clicking on the plus button up here to create new, and then you want to create a net new planned workflow. What the planned workflow does is it drops a new node onto your canvas that allows you to set up a mock workflow before turning anything on in HubSpot. And so if I were to click into this, it again opens the sidebar menu. I can give it a name and call it new nurture workflow. The object type for this one is contact. So I want to leave it at contact. And the enrollment should be, when somebody submits a form. We can use that for now. Under the actions, this is where you pick the action that is happening when somebody is in this workflow. So the enrollment is somebody submits a form, and then the actions are that we can say, okay, we want them to set a property, for example. And then the property, because we have just talked about lifecycle stage, I want to use this one as an example. If I search for lifecycle stage and find that right here, we can see that right off the bat. Howly has already created connections around lifecycle stage, but because you can't set lifecycle stage as a singular property, you actually have to select what the property is. In this case, I'm going to select marketing qualified lead, meaning if I have a net new workflow that I want to set up, and the trigger is that somebody submits a form, and one of the actions in the workflow is that it sets a property, that property being MQL, we can see that that action will trigger 3 workflows. Again, it won't trigger the inactive workflows, but it will trigger this workflow here called last active date is 45 days plus MQL. And so that is how you want to go ahead and create a planned workflow on your canvas. And you can have as many of these as you would like. You can certainly change it around, an opportunity, for example. Okay, there's nothing here. So this means that you can safely create a workflow that sets the property stage, lifecycle stage as opportunity. If I go customer, for example, okay, there are 3 workflows that are being triggered when a lifecycle stage or when a workflow sets the property customer under lifecycle stage, it then triggers these 3 workflows. And as we can see, we left a note on this earlier. So please review 4 workflows arriving to this. We probably don't want another one. I'm going to delete this for now before we get into the report. The last thing that I want to cover today, as we've gone through the recent changes, we've gone through the workflow health, we've gone through the AI analysis, we've gone through how to create your process map, how to toggle all connections at the same time, we've gone through the different object types, and we've gone through the impact analyzer. But visibility is only one part of the audit. And when it comes to actually exporting any of this information, one thing that Howly does is it provides a complete audit report. And if I click on this audit report right here, we're taken to a separate tab that gives me a full picture, a full visibility into everything that was covered today. So we see 76 workflows, we see our health score, and then we get the executive summary. The executive summary here gives me the total number of workflows, active, inactive, again, with some critical issues, and then some key issues that are requiring my attention. So we have 4 broken enrollments, 39 standalone workflows, 14 duplicate actions. All of this stuff can be found directly in this report. We also see key findings, like these are the workflows with broken enrollments. We see the warnings, we see the duplicate action workflows, stale workflows, so on and so forth. And as we get into the actual workflow analysis, we can see number of workflows by property type. So we have 42 contact workflows, 19 deal workflows, 8 company workflows. These are all things that we see directly on the map here, but this is in report form. We also see the most complex workflows across our portal, and the most complex ones here have up to 6 actions, and that is found right here. And then we can see the various issues by detail. So these are workflows that, again, broken enrollments, stale workflows, standalone workflows. But remember how we did the AI insights earlier? All of that is included as part of your audit report. So this portal shows a mature automation setup with 76 workflows. We just went over that. It shows you all the issues, all the gaps, the opportunities within this portal, as well as the recommendations. And rather than necessarily having to map out each workflow on the canvas yourself, the workflow connection side actually gives you all of that information. So we see that there are 36 total connections. There are 28 connected workflows here, and there are 6 connection clusters. And if I scroll down here, we can see actually the entire workflow map, as it were, by active, by inactive stage. And this is purposefully created, very difficult to show exactly how these clusters are happening. But all of that information is visible right here in the connection section of the map or of the audit report, where you can see upstream and downstream impact of each workflow in your portal. As I scroll down further, we have the workflow inventory. So this is the workflow by status, object type, and actions associated with it. Again, filtered by what was last updated and when. So we show the active, most recent workflows first, and then we show the inactive workflows by object type after that. Under documentation is where we went through and created different notes across the workflows. And all of these can definitely be shown directly on the Howly canvas. As we saw, when we hover over a node here, we can see the notes that was left, which is please review this workflow. But if you're handing this off to a colleague or your manager or a client, this is where you can actually go ahead and create that SOP and documentation piece directly in Howly. So we see the workflow name, we see the risk associated with that, and we see the purpose and the notes. And so a lot of these that I made here are, of course, a high risk. And so please review, and this workflow isn't writing to anything, and please archive, etc. And we can see that we have documented 8 of the 75 workflows, 76 workflows that we have, and 4 are flagged as high risk. As well as we went through the impact analyzer, we can see the most used properties across our portal. And we see this by, lifecycle stage had 26 workflows that it was impacted by. So it triggers 9 workflows and it modifies 17. And same thing for lead status and deal stage. We can see that these are the most used properties across all of our workflows, and changes to these fields carry the highest automation risk. At the very end, we have our full list of recommendations, completely broken down by automation health, workflow maintenance, structure. We have our AI insights layer on top of this. And if you want to, you can even add your own notes, your observation, your recommendations right here in this field as you are presenting this report upwards to your manager, a colleague, a client of yours. And this is exactly how you do it. One thing you can do on the Pro plan is you can go into your account settings and you can actually rank this report using your logo, using your organization's name, using your org colors to make it very specific and hand this off directly to the client without having to make any changes. You should know by now that we love HubSpot at Howly. We're an official HubSpot app with a strong 5-star rating, and we were recently featured as new and notable for Q2 in 2026. So if your HubSpot portal has more than 50 workflows in it, sign up for Howly today, because automation without visibility is just pure guesswork.